My parents tried to evict me and turn my art studio into my sister's nursery, but my lease, one-way ticket, and lawyer made their plan collapse. My name is Cassandra. I am 32 years old, and I never thought my dream art studio would become the center of a family war. When my parents showed up unannounced, demanding I convert my sacred creative space into a nursery for my sister Heather and her kids, they had no idea I had already signed papers to lease my entire house. My one-way ticket to Florence was sitting in my email inbox. I guess timing really is everything. If you are watching this and have ever had to choose between family expectations and your own dreams, you know exactly how this feels. Growing up in suburban Chicago, the dynamic between my sister Heather and me was always clear. 4 years older than me, Heather was the golden child who could do no wrong. She was beautiful, popular, and excelled at everything our parents valued: cheerleading captain, homecoming queen, straight-A student. Meanwhile, I was the quiet, creative one, always with paint under my fingernails and sketchbooks filled with drawings that my parents would glance at with polite disinterest before asking about my math grades. My father, a successful real estate broker, and my mother, an elementary school principal, had a very specific idea of success. Art was a hobby, not a career. When I expressed interest in art school after high school, they practically staged an intervention. My mother sat me down at our kitchen table and pushed brochures for business schools across to me. "Art will not pay the bills, Cassandra," she said. "You need a real degree that leads to a real job." My father nodded in agreement. "We just want what is best for you. Look at Heather. She is studying business administration and already has internship offers." That was the story of my childhood. Heather did things the right way, and I was expected to follow. But something in me refused to bend. After a heated argument that ended with my mother in tears and my father not speaking to me for a week, we reached a compromise. I would attend State University for a marketing degree, but I could minor in fine arts. Those 4 years were a struggle of trying to please my parents while nurturing my true passion. I worked part-time at a local gallery, saved every penny, and built a portfolio in secret. When I graduated with my marketing degree, my parents were ecstatic. When I announced I was also applying to a prestigious Master of Fine Arts program, their smiles froze. "But you have a good degree now," my mother said. "Why waste more time?" The rejection stung, but I had prepared for it. What I had not told them was that I had already been accepted with a partial scholarship. I had enough saved to cover the rest. For the first time in my life, I did not ask for their permission. I simply told them my decision. The 2 years of my MFA program were the most liberating of my life. I flourished away from my parents' expectations, developing a style that combined abstract expressionism with elements of street art. By graduation, I had sold several pieces and caught the attention of a few galleries. My parents attended my final exhibition, and while they did not understand my art, they seemed impressed that people were willing to pay for it. Meanwhile, Heather followed the expected path. She married James, a pharmaceutical sales rep, right after college. They bought a house in the same neighborhood as our parents, had 2 children in quick succession, and seemed to be living the American dream. My parents were thrilled, constantly telling me about Heather's perfect life whenever we spoke on the phone. I took a different route. After my MFA, I worked multiple jobs, saved aggressively, and eventually was able to put a down payment on a small house with a detached garage that I converted into my dream art studio. The house itself was nothing special, a modest 2-bedroom in a developing neighborhood, but the garage was perfect. High ceilings, north-facing windows I installed myself, proper ventilation for oil paints and resins. It was my sanctuary, the place where I finally felt completely myself. Over the next 5 years, I gradually built a name for myself in the regional art scene. I was not famous by any means, but I made enough from my art to quit my side jobs and focus on creating full-time. My parents never quite understood how I supported myself, assuming I must be struggling financially because I chose art over a corporate career. "Are you sure you do not want us to help you find a real job?" my mother would ask during our monthly phone calls. "The school district is always looking for administrative assistants." I would patiently explain that I was doing fine, that my work was selling, that I had even been featured in a respected art magazine. They would make polite noises of acknowledgement before changing the subject to Heather's latest achievement. Heather got a promotion. Heather is remodeling her kitchen. Heather is taking the kids to Disney World. I learned to accept their limited interest in my life and focused on my work instead. I developed connections with galleries in Chicago, Milwaukee, and even a small but prestigious space in New York that carried some of my pieces. And then, 8 months ago, something incredible happened. An Italian gallery owner saw my work during a visit to the States and invited me to participate in an emerging artists program in Florence. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a year-long residency, housing provided, a stipend for materials, and exhibition opportunities throughout Europe. I did not tell my parents immediately, partly because I was not sure I would go through with it, and partly because I knew they would not understand the significance. Instead, I spent weeks researching, making calculations, and weighing my options. The residency would mean leaving my house empty for a year. I could not afford to pay the mortgage without renting it out, but I was nervous about strangers living in my space, potentially damaging my studio. After consulting with a property management company, I decided the best option was to lease the entire house to a visiting professor who needed a place for exactly 1 academic year. The timing was perfect, and she seemed respectful of the space. I would pack up my most precious tools and materials to take with me and store the rest in a climate-controlled unit. Everything was falling into place. I signed the lease agreement 3 weeks before my scheduled departure, put down a deposit on the storage unit, and purchased my one-way ticket to Florence. I planned to tell my family over Sunday dinner 2 weeks before I left. I figured that would give them enough time to process the news without leaving too much time for them to try to talk me out of it. But before I could share my news, Heather's perfect life imploded. James left her for his 24-year-old assistant. Suddenly, my sister was a single mother with 2 small children, a mortgage she could not afford on her part-time salary, and no idea what to do next. And just like that, my parents' attention shifted from praising Heather to rescuing her. The first hint of trouble came 3 weeks before my planned departure date. My mother called on a Tuesday evening while I was working in my studio, deep in the flow state of creating a new piece. I almost did not answer, but a nagging sense of responsibility made me pick up on the final ring. "Cassandra, we need to talk about Heather," my mother said without preamble. I sat down on my paint-splattered stool, already feeling the tension creep into my shoulders. "What about her?" "James left her," my mother said, her voice breaking. "He emptied their joint accounts and moved in with some young girl from his office. Heather is devastated." My heart sank for my sister despite our complicated relationship. "That is terrible, Mom. How are the kids taking it?" "Lily is too young to understand, but Max keeps asking when Daddy is coming home." She paused, and I could hear the expectation in her silence. "How can I help?" I asked, already knowing I would regret the question. "Well," my mother said, her voice brightening slightly, "we were thinking Heather and the kids could stay with you for a little while, just until she figures things out." I froze, paintbrush still in hand. "Stay with me, Mom? My house is tiny, and I work from home. I do not have space for 3 extra people." "But you have 2 bedrooms," she countered, "and that big garage you turned into your hobby room." "Hobby room?" After all these years, she still could not bring herself to call it a studio. "Mom, that is my studio. It is where I work. I cannot have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old running around in there. There are chemicals, expensive equipment." "Family helps family, Cassandra," she interrupted, her voice taking on that disappointed tone I knew so well. "Heather would do it for you." I bit back the urge to point out that Heather had never done anything like that for me. Instead, I took a deep breath and tried to sound reasonable. "Look, I want to help, but I cannot have them stay here. And actually, I was planning to tell you this weekend, but I am going to be leaving for Italy soon. I have been accepted to an artist residency program in Florence." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "So, you are going to abandon your family when we need you for some art thing in Italy?" "It is not just some art thing, Mom. It is a prestigious program that could really advance my career, and I am not abandoning anyone. I just cannot have Heather and the kids live here." I cannot believe how selfish you are being right now, she said, the disappointment in her voice like a physical weight. Your sister is in crisis, and you are talking about running off to Europe. The conversation deteriorated from there, ending with my mother hanging up on me after declaring that she had raised me better than this. I sat in my studio for a long time afterward, staring at my half-finished canvas and feeling the familiar guilt wash over me. But I had worked too hard for this opportunity. The Florence residency was a potential turning point for my career, a chance to study in the birthplace of Renaissance art and make connections in the European art world. I could not give that up, even for my sister. The next day, my father called. This was unusual enough to make me nervous. My father rarely initiated contact, preferring to let my mother handle family communications. Cassandra, he began, his voice stern but controlled, your mother told me about your conversation yesterday. Dad, I want to help Heather, but I cannot have them live here, and this opportunity in Florence is really important for my career. Career, he repeated, as if the word tasted strange in his mouth. Cassandra, your sister has lost everything, her husband, her financial security, her home. She has 2 small children to take care of. That is a real crisis, not getting to paint pictures in Italy. The dismissal stung, but I held my ground. I understand she is going through a hard time, Dad. But I have signed contracts. I have leased my house to someone else already. I cannot back out now. There was a pause. You leased your house without telling us? I realized my mistake too late. I had not meant to reveal that part yet. Yes, to a visiting professor for the academic year. She is moving in next week. Well, unlease it, he said, as if it were that simple. Tell this professor person that there has been a family emergency. Dad, I cannot do that. I have signed a legally binding contract, and I need the rental income to cover my mortgage while I am gone. He sighed heavily. I do not understand you, Cassandra. Family should come first, always. After hanging up, I felt a mix of guilt and resentment that was all too familiar. My parents had always made me feel like my desires and goals were secondary, less important than the family agenda, which usually meant whatever Heather needed. I was so distracted by the conversation that I knocked over a jar of brushes, scattering them across the floor. As I bent to pick them up, I noticed my hands were trembling. Despite my resolve, my parents still had the power to make me question myself. That evening, Heather herself called. This was even more unusual than hearing from my father. My sister and I spoke maybe 3 or 4 times a year, mostly at family gatherings. Cass, she said, and I could tell she had been crying, Mom told me you cannot help us out. I closed my eyes, trying to stay calm. Of course, my mother had framed it that way. Heather, I am sorry about everything you are going through, but I am leaving for Italy in 3 weeks. My house is already leased to someone else. Italy? She sounded genuinely surprised. Mom did not mention that part. She just said you would not let us stay with you. For a moment, I felt a flash of connection with my sister, both of us subject to our mother's selective communication. Yeah, I have been accepted to a year-long art residency in Florence. It is a really big opportunity for me. Oh, she paused. That sounds amazing, actually. Congratulations. Her sincere response caught me off guard. Thanks, Heather. I really am sorry about James. What a jerk. She gave a watery laugh. Yeah, he really is. I just do not know what I am going to do, Cass. I cannot afford our house on my part-time salary, and I cannot find full-time work that would cover childcare costs. Mom and Dad offered to let us stay with them, but you know how Mom is. She is already driving me crazy with her hovering and her advice. I felt a pang of sympathy. I knew exactly how overwhelming our mother could be. What about James? Is he paying child support? His lawyer is fighting it, she said, her voice hardening. Says he needs time to adjust his finances. Meanwhile, he is taking his assistant to Cancun next week. That is awful. I wish I could help, really, but my flight leaves in 3 weeks, and the professor moves in next week. There was a long pause. What about just until you leave? Could we stay for 2 weeks? It would give me a little more time to figure things out. I hesitated. 2 weeks seemed manageable, and it would be a way to help without derailing my plans. I guess that could work. But Heather, the studio is off limits. I am serious. I am finishing commission pieces before I leave, and I cannot have the kids in there. Of course, she agreed quickly. We will stay out of your way. I promise. Thank you, Cass. You are a lifesaver. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling uneasy. Something told me this would not be as simple as Heather made it sound. But what could go wrong in just 2 weeks? I was about to find out. Heather and the kids moved in the following weekend with 5 suitcases, 3 boxes of toys, a portable crib, a car seat, a stroller, and what seemed like enough snack food to survive an apocalypse. My compact house, once organized and peaceful, transformed into a chaotic landscape of plastic toys and sticky surfaces overnight. We will try to stay out of your way, Heather promised as she set up the portable crib in my guest room, which doubled as my office. The kids and I can share this room, no problem. I nodded, already feeling claustrophobic. Great. And remember, the studio is completely off limits. Of course, Heather agreed. I have already told Max that the garage is a no-go zone. For the first 2 days, things were relatively smooth. Heather kept the kids occupied. They ate meals together in the kitchen while I worked in my studio, and everyone respected my space. But on day 3, the first boundary was crossed. I returned from a quick trip to the art supply store to find my studio door ajar. Inside, Heather was standing in front of one of my larger canvases, a work in progress for an important client. "What are you doing in here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice level. She jumped slightly. "Oh, sorry, Cass. I was just curious about what you were working on. This is really good." "Thanks, but I need you to respect the studio rule. No one in here but me." She looked hurt. "I was not touching anything. I just wanted to see your work." "I know, but I have expensive materials and unfinished pieces in here. It is my workspace." She nodded, but as she left, I heard her mutter, so precious about her little paintings. That evening, I found Max playing with my laptop, which I had left on the kitchen table. He had somehow opened my photo editing software and was happily clicking through filters on a professional headshot I used for my website. "Max, buddy, that is not a toy," I said, gently taking the computer from him. "That is for my work." "But I am making it pretty," he protested. "Look, I made you purple." Heather laughed from the couch where she was scrolling through her phone. "He is just playing, Cass. He is not hurting anything. Actually, he could accidentally delete files or change settings I need for work," I explained, trying to sound reasonable. "Maybe we could set up a space with his own toys." Heather rolled her eyes. "You do not have kids, so you do not get it. 4-year-olds touch everything. It is what they do." The comment stung, implying that my childless status somehow made my boundaries less valid, but I bit my tongue, not wanting to escalate the situation. As the days passed, more boundaries eroded. I found sticky handprints on my studio door. The guest room became so overrun with Heather's and the kids' belongings that I could no longer access my desk. The kitchen counter, where I usually ate quick meals, was permanently covered in sippy cups and half-eaten snacks. "Heather, I need to be able to use my office," I said one morning after finding my desk chair repurposed as a tower of stuffed animals. "Sorry," she said, not looking up from her phone. "The kids need space to play. This house is really not set up for children." "It is not set up for children because I do not have children," I pointed out. "It is set up for my life and my work." She gave me a look that was both pitying and judgmental. "Well, some things are more important than work, Cass." The implication was clear, her needs as a mother trumped my needs as an artist. It was the same hierarchy of values our parents had always imposed, where my passion was diminished to a hobby, less serious and important than traditional family roles. A week into their stay, my parents began dropping by unannounced. The first time, they brought groceries, which seemed helpful until I realized they had rearranged my kitchen to make room for the family-sized boxes of cereal and juice pouches. "We thought you could use some help," my mother explained as she wiped down my counters with a disinfectant that overwhelmed my small kitchen with the smell of artificial lemon. "Heather says you have been working a lot." There was an accusation in her tone, suggesting I was neglecting my sister and the kids by continuing to work on the commissions I needed to complete before leaving. "I have deadlines," I explained, "pieces I promised to clients before I go." "Well, family should come first," my father said, echoing his words from our phone conversation. "Heather needs support right now." The visits increased in frequency. My mother would arrive with more groceries or toys for the kids or to help with housework, which really meant criticizing how I kept my home. My father would take Max to the park, but not before making comments about how the garage would make a great play space with a little reorganization. "All those art supplies could be stored in bins," he suggested one afternoon. "You could put up some shelves in the laundry room for them. Then the kids would have somewhere to play when it rains." I stared at him, incredulous. "Dad, that is my studio. It is where I work. I am not converting it into a playroom." He shrugged. "It just seems like a waste of space for one person when there are 3 people crowded into that tiny guest room." The pressure built steadily. Heather began leaving her laundry in my bedroom. My mother started referring to my house as Heather's temporary home. My father measured the garage windows, muttering about installing safety locks. 2 days before the professor was scheduled to move in, I overheard a conversation between my parents and Heather in the kitchen. I had been working in my studio and came inside for a glass of water, stopping short when I heard my name. "Cassandra is being ridiculous about this Italy thing," my mother was saying. "She can defer for a year. Family comes first." "I know," Heather agreed. "And honestly, this house would be perfect for us. The school district is good, and the yard, while small, is fenced. The kids would be safe. That garage would make a wonderful playroom," my father added. "Or you could convert it back to parking and build a small addition for the kids' bedrooms." I stood frozen in the hallway, unable to believe what I was hearing. They were discussing renovating my house as if it belonged to them, as if my plans were irrelevant. "But what about the professor?" Heather asked. "Cass says she signed a lease." "Leases can be broken," my father said dismissively. "There are clauses for family emergencies." "I will talk to her." That was when I made my presence known, stepping into the kitchen with my heart pounding. "You will do no such thing." 3 startled faces turned toward me. My mother recovered first. "Cassandra, we were just discussing options." "Options for my house?" I asked, my voice tight. "Without me?" "Now, Cassandra," my father began in his placating tone, "we are just trying to help Heather figure things out." "By giving away my house? By canceling my plans without even consulting me?" Heather, at least, had the grace to look embarrassed. "Cass, it was not like that. We were just talking." "No, you were making plans for my life, for my home." I was shaking now, years of being overlooked and dismissed bubbling to the surface. "This is my house. I bought it. I pay the mortgage. I decide what happens to it." "Do not be so dramatic," my mother sighed. "We are just trying to find a solution that works for everyone." "For everyone, or just for Heather?" I challenged. "Because from where I am standing, your solution completely ignores what I want and need." "What you want is to abandon your family to go paint in Italy," my father said, his voice hardening. "Meanwhile, your sister and her children need a home." "And my home is the only option in the entire city?" I asked. "What about your house? You have more space than I do." My parents exchanged glances. "Well, we thought they would be more independent here," my mother said carefully. Translation: they did not want Heather and the kids disrupting their empty nester lifestyle, but they were perfectly fine with them disrupting mine. "I am leaving for Florence in 12 days, I said firmly. "The professor moves in on Monday." These are not suggestions or possibilities. They are facts, plans I have made for my life and my career that are already in motion. My father stood up, his expression stormy. We need to have a serious conversation about your priorities, Cassandra. I felt a headache building behind my eyes. My priorities are clear. I am pursuing my career, which you have always treated as a hobby. I am honoring my commitments, both to the residency program and to the professor who is leasing my house. And what about your commitment to family? My mother asked softly, playing her trump card. I looked at the three of them sitting around my kitchen table, planning to rearrange my life without my consent. Something inside me hardened. I will help Heather find another solution, I said evenly. But she cannot stay here past Sunday. With that, I turned and walked back to my studio, locking the door behind me. Through the walls, I could hear the murmur of their voices, no doubt discussing my selfishness and lack of family loyalty. But for once, I did not care what they thought. I had worked too hard and sacrificed too much to let them take this opportunity from me. The next morning, my studio door was unlocked. Saturday morning, 2 days before the professor was scheduled to move in, I woke to the sound of voices in my studio. Alarmed, I threw on a robe and rushed outside to find my father and another man standing in the middle of my creative space, measuring tape in hand. "Dad, what is going on?" I demanded, my voice sharp with panic. My father turned, looking only slightly guilty. "Morning, Cassandra. This is Rick. He is a contractor friend of mine." I asked him to take a look at the space just to get an idea of what it would take to convert it. "Convert it?" I repeated, incredulous. "Convert my studio without asking me?" Rick looked uncomfortable, glancing between us. "I will, wait outside," he muttered, slipping past me. Once we were alone, my father sighed. "Cassandra, we need to be practical here. Your sister and her children need a place to live. This garage would make a perfect play area and classroom for homeschooling." "Homeschooling? Since when is Heather homeschooling the kids?" "She is considering it," he said vaguely. "The point is, this space could be so much more useful than just a place for your art supplies." I stared at him. A lifetime of having my passion dismissed as a hobby, a phase, a waste of time, crystallized in that moment. "Get out," I said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my studio. Get out of my house and take Rick with you." "Cassandra, you are overreacting." "Overreacting?" My voice rose. "You broke into my workspace to plan how to dismantle it without my knowledge or consent. How exactly should I react?" "I did not break in. The door was unlocked." "No, it was not. I had specifically locked it after the previous night's confrontation." "Someone unlocked it. Was it you, or did you have Heather do it?" His silence was answer enough. "Leave now." My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady. "And tell Mom and Heather to meet me in the kitchen in 1 hour. We need to talk." After my father left, I stood in my studio, looking at the space I had created with so much love and care. The custom-built shelves for my canvases, the north-facing windows I had installed myself, the ventilation system that had cost me 3 months of savings. This was not just a room. It was an extension of myself, a physical manifestation of my commitment to my art, and my family saw it as nothing more than wasted space that could be better used for Heather's children. I spent the next hour packing essential supplies and securing my most valuable pieces. Whatever happened next, I was not taking any chances with my work. At precisely 10 o'clock, I entered my kitchen to find my parents and Heather waiting. My mother was making coffee as if she owned the place. Heather was feeding Lily in a high chair that I had never seen before, and Max was watching cartoons on a tablet, the volume uncomfortably loud. "We need to talk," I said, turning off the television despite Max's protests. "Now, Cassandra," my mother began in her principal voice, "I know you are upset, but there is no need for dramatics." "Dramatics?" "Dad brought a contractor into my studio this morning to plan how to convert it without my permission. I would say that warrants some upset." Heather, at least, had the decency to look embarrassed. I told them they should ask you first. Ask me? There is nothing to ask. The answer is no. No, you cannot convert my studio. No, you cannot stay here past tomorrow. No, I am not canceling my plans for Italy. My mother set down her coffee cup with a sharp click. Cassandra Miller, I raised you better than this. Your sister is in crisis. She has 2 small children and nowhere to go. She has options, I countered. She could stay with you. She could look for an apartment. She could pursue child support more aggressively. What she cannot do is take over my house and my life. Your art hobby can wait, my father interjected. Family cannot. Something in me snapped at the word hobby. It is not a hobby. It is my career, my passion, my life's work. And the fact that, after all these years, after all the exhibitions and sales and recognition, you still call it a hobby tells me everything I need to know about how little you respect me and my choices. The kitchen fell silent, except for Lily's babbling. That is not fair, my mother finally said. We have always supported you. No, you have always tolerated me. There is a difference. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I have made my decision. I am going to Florence. The professor is moving in on Monday. Heather and the kids need to be out by tomorrow evening. And where are we supposed to go? Heather asked, her voice trembling. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt. But then I remembered finding my studio door unlocked, remembered the contractor measuring my space, remembered years of having my art and my choices diminished. You can stay with Mom and Dad until you figure something out, I suggested. Their house is twice the size of mine with an actual spare bedroom instead of a home office. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Well, we were thinking, my mother began carefully, that it might be better for the children to have their own space. Our house is not really set up for little ones. And mine is? I challenged. The house I bought specifically as a single person with no children? But you are leaving anyway, my father pointed out. It just makes sense for Heather to use the space while you are gone. I shook my head in disbelief. I have already leased the house to Professor Wilson. She is moving in on Monday. It is a legally binding contract. Contracts can be broken, my father insisted, for family emergencies. This is not an emergency. This is a situation that has multiple solutions, none of which require me to give up my home and cancel my career plans. My mother's face hardened. I cannot believe how selfish you are being, Cassandra, after everything we have done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Mom? When have you ever supported my art? When have you ever put my needs above Heather's? Heather flinched, and for a moment, I regretted dragging her into this particular aspect of the argument. This was about our parents' behavior more than hers. That is completely unfair, my mother protested. We paid for your college. You paid for a marketing degree I never wanted and have never used, I corrected. I paid for my MFA myself. I bought this house myself. I built my career myself. And I am not going to let you take any of it away from me. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. I think you need to reconsider your position, Cassandra. Family should come first. I agree. Family should come first. Which is why I am amazed that you would try to sabotage my career and take away my home instead of offering Heather space in your own house. That is different, he sputtered. How? How is it different? He had no answer. I turned to Heather. I am sorry about your situation, truly, but this is not the solution. You and the kids need to be out by tomorrow evening. Heather nodded slowly, tears in her eyes. Fine, we will figure something out. My mother stood up as well, her lips pressed into a thin line. I am very disappointed in you, Cassandra. Very disappointed indeed. As they gathered their things to leave, my father paused at the door. This conversation is not over. We will discuss this further tomorrow. After they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, feeling both drained and oddly liberated. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I had stood my ground against my parents' expectations and manipulations. It did not feel good, exactly, but it felt necessary, like lancing a wound that had been festering for years. I spent the rest of the day securing my studio more thoroughly, installing a deadbolt that only I had the key to. Then I called Professor Wilson to confirm our arrangements for Monday. I needed to be certain that at least one part of my plan was still on track. The next morning, Sunday, I woke to find a document on my kitchen table. At first glance, it appeared to be an official legal form with formal letterhead and legal language. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was a crude attempt at an official notice created on my father's home computer. The document declared that, as dependent family members in need, Heather and her children had rights to occupy my property under family assistance laws, and that I was legally obligated to provide housing for them in my absence. It was completely fabricated, of course, no such laws existed, but the document was clearly meant to intimidate me, to make me doubt myself and my rights as a homeowner. I was still staring at this ridiculous document when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my parents and Heather standing there, looking grim and determined. "We need to talk," my father said, pushing past me into the house. My mother followed, carrying a folder of papers. "We have been doing some research, Cassandra, about tenant rights and family obligation laws." I closed the door slowly, a sense of unreality washing over me. Were they really going to try to legally force me to give up my house? "I have read your little document," I said, holding up the paper from my kitchen table. "It is completely made up. There are no family assistance laws that require me to house Heather." "Perhaps not specifically," my father conceded, "but there are tenant protection laws. Heather has been living here for over a week now. In some jurisdictions, that establishes tenancy." I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Are you seriously threatening me with legal action to take over my house?" "Not take over," my mother said quickly. "Just to ensure that Heather and the children have a place to stay while you are gone. I already have a tenant," I reminded them. "Professor Wilson, who is moving in tomorrow." "You can call her and explain the situation," my father insisted. "Family emergency, she will understand." "And if she does not, if she sues me for breach of contract, who pays those legal fees? Who compensates her for having to find new housing at the last minute? Who pays my mortgage when I do not have rental income?" My parents exchanged glances. "We had not gotten that far in our planning," my mother admitted. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "This has gone far enough. I am not canceling my plans. I am not breaking my contract with Professor Wilson. And I am not letting you bully me into giving up my home." "Bully?" my mother repeated, offended. "We are trying to help your sister." "By hurting me," I pointed out, "by dismissing my career, my plans, my legal obligations. That is not help. That is manipulation." Heather, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "Cass, please. I do not know where else to go." I looked at my sister, seeing both the woman who had always been favored and the frightened single mother she had become. "Mom and Dad have a 4-bedroom house. They have space. They just do not want their routine disrupted." My parents began to protest, but I held up a hand to silence them. "This ends now. You all need to leave. Heather, get your things and the kids. You need to be out by 5 o'clock today. If you are not, I will call the police to report trespassers." "You would not dare," my mother gasped. "Try me," I said, surprised by my own resolve. "This is my house, my life, my decision. And I am done letting you all treat it as less important than everyone else's." The shock on their faces would have been almost comical if the situation were not so painful. They had never expected me to stand up to them, to refuse to bend to family pressure. I had always been the accommodating one, the one who gave in for the sake of peace. But not this time. This time I had too much to lose: my dream, my career, my future. My father's face darkened with anger. "You will regret this, Cassandra. When you are alone in Italy with no family to support you, you will regret choosing your paintings over your sister's well-being." I met his gaze steadily. I might regret many things, Dad. But standing up for myself will not be one of them. After my family left, I immediately called my friend Julia, who happened to be a real estate attorney. I explained the situation in a voice that trembled despite my best efforts to stay calm. They actually tried to claim tenant rights? Julia asked, incredulous. After staying with you for what, 10 days? Just over a week, I confirmed. And they created this fake legal document to try to intimidate me. Wow. That is something else. I could hear her typing in the background. Okay, here is what we are going to do. First, I am going to draft a formal letter stating your rights as the property owner and making it clear that Heather has no legal claim to tenancy. Second, I am going to outline the consequences if they try to interfere with your contract with Professor Wilson. Can you make it very official looking? I asked, with legal letterhead and everything? They need to understand I am serious. Trust me, by the time I am done, they will know exactly how serious this is. While waiting for Julia's letter, I took additional precautions. I changed all the locks on the house and studio. I installed a simple security camera system that would send alerts to my phone. I made copies of all important documents, the lease agreement with Professor Wilson, the acceptance letter from the Florence residency program, the deed to my house. I also called Professor Wilson to warn her about the situation. I just want to make sure you know that the transition on Monday should go smoothly, but my family has been difficult about my plans to leave. I appreciate the heads up, she said. Do you anticipate any problems with moving in? I do not think so. I have taken legal steps to ensure everything goes as planned, but if anyone other than me contacts you about the house, please let me know immediately. Of course. And Cassandra, it sounds like you are making the right decision for your career. The Florence program is incredibly prestigious. You should be proud. Her words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Here was a stranger showing more support for my art career than my family ever had. Julia's letter arrived by email that evening, and it was perfect. Formal legal letterhead, precise language outlining property rights and potential consequences for interference, and a clear statement that any further attempts to claim rights to my property would result in legal action. I printed 3 copies, one for each family member, and drove them to my parents' house. I was not surprised to find Heather's car in the driveway. Apparently, they had found space for her and the kids after all. No one answered when I rang the doorbell, though I could hear voices inside. After a moment's hesitation, I slipped the envelopes through the mail slot and returned to my car. I had done what I needed to do. The next morning, Monday, I woke early to make final preparations for Professor Wilson's arrival. I had already packed most of my personal belongings, storing them in the climate-controlled unit I had rented. My suitcases for Italy were ready by the door. All that remained was a final cleaning and preparing the keys and house manual for the professor. I was wiping down kitchen counters when my phone rang. It was my mother. Cassandra, she began, her voice tight, we received your lawyer's letters. Good, I said simply. I cannot believe you would go this far, threatening legal action against your own family. I cannot believe you would try to take my house and derail my career, I countered. So, I guess we are both surprised. There was a long pause. Your father is furious. I imagine he is. He is not used to me standing up for myself. Heather is devastated. She really thought you would help her. I sighed, feeling a twinge of guilt despite everything. I offered to help her find another solution. I offered financial assistance for a security deposit on an apartment. What I could not offer was my house, which was already committed to someone else. She is your sister, my mother said, as if that explained and excused everything. Yes, she is. And you are her parents. Yet somehow the burden of solving her housing crisis fell entirely on me. Why is that, Mom? Another long silence. It is not that we did not want to help. It is just that your house seemed like the perfect solution, especially since you were leaving anyway. My house is not a community resource. It is my home, my property, and I had already made legal commitments regarding it. Well, my mother said stiffly, I suppose that is all very clear now, thanks to your lawyer friend. I am glad we understand each other. Professor Wilson will be arriving at noon. I trust there will be no further attempts to interfere with that. No, she conceded. Your father says we should wash our hands of the whole situation. The word stung more than I wanted to admit. If that is how you feel. What did you expect, Cassandra? You chose your art over your family. I closed my eyes, gathering strength. I chose my career and my legal obligations over unreasonable demands. There is a difference. Not to us, she said simply, and hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, feeling both victorious and hollowed out. I had won this battle, protected my house and my plans for Italy, but at what cost to my family relationships? Before I could dwell on it further, there was a knock at the door. Professor Wilson had arrived early. I hope you do not mind, she said with a warm smile. I was eager to get settled before my department meeting tomorrow. Not at all, I assured her, handing over the keys. The house is all yours. As I showed her around, explaining the quirks of the old water heater and where to find the circuit breaker, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. This was happening. I was really going to Florence. No one had managed to take this opportunity from me. After helping the professor bring in her first load of boxes, I gathered my suitcases and took one last look around the house. It was strange to think of someone else living here for the next year, sleeping in my bedroom, cooking in my kitchen, but it also felt right. This house had been a crucial chapter in my development as an artist, but now it was time for the next chapter. Florence awaited. As I loaded my car, I noticed my parents' vehicle slowly driving past. They did not stop or acknowledge me, just drove by as if checking that I was really leaving. I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of resolve. Sometimes, growth requires painful separations. My flight to Italy was scheduled for the following morning. I would spend tonight in a hotel near the airport, leaving my old life behind and stepping into a new one. As I drove away from my house, I caught a glimpse of Professor Wilson in the window, already making the space her own. It was done. I had stood my ground. Florence and all its artistic possibilities lay ahead. 3 months into my residency in Florence, I was thriving. My studio in the residency building overlooked terracotta rooftops and the distant hills of Tuscany. I had made friends with other artists from around the world, improved my Italian beyond tourist phrases, and produced more work in these 3 months than I had in the previous 6 back home. The program was everything I had hoped for and more: weekly critiques with renowned artists, access to museums and galleries most tourists never saw, connections with European curators and collectors. My work was evolving in ways I had not anticipated, influenced by the quality of light in Tuscany, the layers of history in the ancient buildings, the different rhythms of life. My only cloud was the situation with my family. Since arriving in Italy, I had received exactly 2 communications: a curt email from my mother letting me know that Heather had found an apartment and a cheerful update from Professor Wilson confirming that everything with the house was fine. No congratulations on the residency, no questions about my life in Florence, no acknowledgement of my achievement in being selected for such a prestigious program, just silence. I tried to focus on my work, on building new relationships, on absorbing everything this opportunity had to offer. But the estrangement from my family left a hollow space that even the beauty of Florence could not quite fill. Then, on a rainy Tuesday in November, I received an unexpected email from Heather. The subject line simply read, "Sorry." Curious and a little apprehensive, I opened it to find a surprisingly long and thoughtful message. "Cass, I have been doing a lot of thinking these past months, and I owe you an apology. I was so caught up in my own crisis that I did not consider how my demands were affecting you. I took advantage of your generosity and then got angry when you set boundaries. I am sorry. Mom and Dad still think you abandoned the family in our time of need, but I am starting to see things differently. The truth is, I have relied on other people to solve my problems for too long, first James, then our parents, then you. It was easier to blame everyone else than to take responsibility for my own life. Since moving into my apartment, which is small but actually perfect for us, I have gotten a full-time job at a marketing firm. The hours are flexible, the pay is decent, and they have on-site childcare. For the first time in my adult life, I am completely supporting myself and my kids. It feels both terrifying and empowering. I saw your latest work on your Instagram. The colors, the movement, it is different from what you were doing before. Stronger, somehow. Italy seems to be good for your art. I am happy for you, even if I was too selfish to say so before. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that I am sorry for how everything happened. And I am actually grateful now that you stood your ground. It forced me to stand on my own feet, which was exactly what I needed. Take care, Heather. I read the email 3 times, tears welling up unexpectedly. It was perhaps the first time in our adult lives that Heather had seen me clearly, had acknowledged my needs as valid, had treated my art as something real and important. I responded immediately, thanking her for the apology and congratulating her on her job and new independence. I shared more details about my life in Florence, the challenges and triumphs, the ways my work was changing. It felt like the beginning of a new kind of relationship between us, one based on mutual respect rather than the old family dynamics. Heather's email opened a door. We began corresponding regularly, sharing updates about our lives. She sent photos of the kids in their Halloween costumes. I sent images of my works in progress. It was tentative at first, but gradually became more natural and open. Our parents remained distant, however. My mother sent occasional brief updates about extended family or neighborhood news, but never asked about my art or life in Italy. My father did not communicate at all. Then, in early December, I received news that changed everything. My work had been selected for a prestigious exhibition at a gallery in Rome. It was a massive honor, particularly for an American artist in the residency program. The gallery director had seen my work during a visit to Florence and immediately offered me a spot in their upcoming show featuring emerging international artists. I shared the news with Heather, who responded with genuine enthusiasm and pride. "This is huge, Cass. I am so proud of you. Are Mom and Dad coming for the opening?" I had not even considered inviting them. Our relationship was still so strained, and I assumed they had no interest in my art career, but Heather's question planted a seed. Perhaps this achievement, this external validation of my work, might help bridge the gap between us. After much deliberation, I sent them an email. Formal but not cold, I explained about the exhibition, its significance in the art world, and extended an invitation to the opening in January. It would mean a lot to have family there, I concluded, leaving the door open without begging. For 2 weeks, there was no response. I tried not to be disappointed. I had expected as much, but then, 3 days before Christmas, I received an email from my mother. "Cassandra, your father and I have discussed your invitation. We have booked flights to Rome for the gallery opening. Heather has agreed to join us. Please send details about accommodation recommendations. Congratulations on your exhibition. Mom." It was hardly effusive, but it was a start. They were coming. My family was actually coming to see my work, to witness this milestone in my career. The weeks leading up to the exhibition were a blur of preparation, finalizing the pieces for display, working with the gallery staff on installation, writing artist statements, giving interviews to local arts publications. Through it all, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety about my family's impending visit. The day before the opening, they arrived in Rome. We met at a cafe near their hotel, the awkwardness palpable as we exchanged stiff greetings. My father looked older somehow, more gray at his temples. My mother was as immaculately put together as always, but there was a tension around her eyes. Heather, by contrast, seemed more relaxed and confident than I had seen her in years. "The kids are with James's parents," she explained when I asked about Max and Lily. "We have established a decent co-parenting relationship. Not friendly, exactly, but functional." "That is great," I said, genuinely pleased for her. "How is the job going?" "Really well. I have been promoted already, actually, team leader for the social media division." My parents watched our easy exchange with something like confusion. This new dynamic between Heather and me did not fit their understanding of our relationship. "Your apartment in Florence," my mother said, changing the subject, "is it comfortable?" It was such a normal parental question that it caught me off guard. "Yes, it is small but perfect. Views of the Arno River from my bedroom window." "And the program, is it what you expected?" This from my father, surprising me further. "It is more than I expected. The mentorship, the connections, the exposure to different techniques and perspectives, it has transformed my work." He nodded, something unreadable in his expression. "That is good. We will see tomorrow, I suppose." The conversation continued, stilted but civil. We discussed their flight, the hotel, places they might visit while in Rome. Art was mentioned only obliquely, as if they were still uncomfortable acknowledging it as my legitimate career. After an hour, we parted ways, agreeing to meet at the gallery the following evening. I returned to my temporary accommodations in Rome, feeling unsettled. They had come all this way, but the distance between us seemed as vast as ever. The next evening, I arrived at the gallery early, nervous energy making it impossible to sit still in my hotel room. The space looked magnificent, my paintings arranged thoughtfully among works by artists from Japan, Brazil, South Africa, and across Europe. The gallery director had positioned my largest piece, an abstract exploration of displacement and belonging, on the main wall, visible from the entrance. As guests began to arrive, I found myself searching for my family's faces among the crowd. Critics, collectors, fellow artists, and art enthusiasts filled the space, glasses of Prosecco in hand, but no sign of my parents or Heather. Had they changed their minds, decided not to come after all? The thought sent a wave of disappointment through me, stronger than I had expected. Then, just as the gallery director was preparing to make her opening remarks, they appeared at the entrance. My mother in a black cocktail dress I had never seen before, my father uncomfortable but dignified in a suit, Heather looking stylish and confident. They stood just inside the doorway, taking in the scene, and then my father's gaze locked on my central painting. He stared at it with an intensity that made me hold my breath. Slowly, they made their way through the crowd toward me. "Cassandra," my mother said, kissing my cheek, "the gallery is lovely." "Thank you for coming," I replied, emotion making my voice slightly unsteady. "We would not miss it," Heather said warmly, giving me a real hug. My father remained silent, his eyes moving from painting to painting, his expression unreadable. The gallery director began her introduction, welcoming everyone and explaining the concept behind the exhibition. She spoke about each featured artist briefly, saving me for last. "And finally, we are honored to present the work of Cassandra Miller, whose bold explorations of identity, displacement, and reconciliation have captivated our selection committee. Miss Miller joins us from the prestigious Florence International Residency, where her work has undergone a remarkable evolution. Please join me in celebrating these extraordinary artists." Applause filled the gallery, and then the crowd dispersed to view the works more closely. I was immediately approached by a critic from an international art magazine, eager to discuss my techniques and influences. As I spoke with various guests, I kept one eye on my family. Heather moved confidently through the space, studying each painting, occasionally chatting with other attendees. My mother stayed close to the wall, sipping her Prosecco and watching the crowd with an anthropologist's interest. My father, to my surprise, stood before my central painting for nearly 20 minutes, utterly still, his gaze never wavering. Later, as the event was winding down, he finally approached me. "Your work," he said quietly, "it is not what I expected." I braced myself for criticism. "What did you expect? Something decorative, pretty landscapes or still lives?" He gestured toward my painting. "This has power, emotion. It is saying something important." I stared at him, hardly believing what I was hearing. "I did not understand before," he continued, his voice rough, "why this mattered so much to you, why you would choose it over other things." He cleared his throat. "I think I am beginning to see now." It was not an apology, not exactly, but from my father, this acknowledgement was monumental. "Thank you," I said simply. "That means a lot." My mother joined us, her expression softer than I had seen it in years. Several people have asked if we are your parents, she said. They seemed impressed by your work. One man called it visceral and unflinching. The gallery director told me 2 of your pieces have already sold, Heather added, excitement in her voice, to some collector from Berlin. I nodded, still processing my father's words. It has been a successful evening. We owe you an apology, Cassandra, my mother said suddenly. We should have supported your choice to come here. We should have respected your decision about your house. I glanced at my father, wondering if he shared this sentiment. He met my gaze directly. We were wrong, he said simply, about many things. In that moment, something shifted between us, not a complete healing, not yet, but a beginning, an acknowledgement of past wrongs, a recognition of me as an adult with valid choices and a legitimate career. As we left the gallery together, planning to share a late dinner, I felt a sense of cautious hope. My family had traveled across an ocean to see my work. They had witnessed my success, my growth, my new life, and in doing so, they had taken the first step toward a new kind of relationship, one based on respect rather than expectation. The road ahead would not be easy. Years of patterns and dynamics could not be undone in a single evening. But as we walked through the ancient streets of Rome, talking more openly than we had in years, I allowed myself to believe that something valuable had been salvaged from the ruins of our previous relationship. My decision to stand firm, to protect my career and my dreams, had not only transformed my art but had perhaps, in some unexpected way, transformed my family as well. 1 year after my departure for Florence, I stood in my studio back home, surrounded by the familiar yet somehow different space. Professor Wilson had maintained the house beautifully, leaving it exactly as she had found it, but I was not the same person who had left 12 months ago. My residency had been extended for an additional 3 months following the success of the Rome exhibition. My work had been featured in several European galleries, written about in international art publications, and purchased by collectors from 3 continents. I had returned to the States with a reputation, connections, and opportunities one could not have imagined a year earlier, but the most profound changes were not in my career, but in my understanding of myself and my relationships. In the aftermath of the Rome exhibition, my family and I had begun the slow, sometimes painful process of rebuilding, weekly video calls, more honest communication, gradual acknowledgement of old wounds and patterns. My father had actually visited me in Florence for a weekend in March, awkwardly but sincerely engaging with my art world, asking questions about techniques and inspirations, trying to understand this part of my life he had dismissed for so long. Heather and I had developed a friendship independent of our parents, supporting each other through challenges and celebrating victories. She had been promoted again, was dating a kind elementary school teacher, and had found a balance between her career and motherhood that seemed to fulfill her. The victim mentality that had defined her after James left had been replaced by a resilient self-sufficiency that I deeply respected. My mother remained the most tentative in our new family dynamic, old habits of judgment and comparison surfacing occasionally in her comments, but she was trying in her way, sending articles about art exhibitions she thought might interest me, asking about my work with what seemed like genuine curiosity. As I unpacked my supplies and rearranged my studio, I reflected on the lessons of the past year. Standing firm for my dreams had cost me in the short term, causing pain and conflict, but had ultimately led to growth for everyone involved. By refusing to sacrifice my needs for others' expectations, I had not only protected my career but had inadvertently created space for new, healthier relationships to develop. The crisis with my house and studio had forced a long overdue confrontation with family patterns that had limited all of us. My parents had to recognize me as an independent adult with valid choices. Heather had to take responsibility for her own life rather than expecting others to solve her problems. And I had to learn that setting boundaries was not selfish but necessary for authentic relationships. In some ways, the geographical distance had facilitated emotional clarity. From across an ocean, family dynamics that had seemed inevitable and unchangeable revealed themselves as choices we were all making, patterns we could choose to break. My phone buzzed with a text from Heather. Studio set up yet? Kids excited for art lesson with Aunt Cass tomorrow? I smiled, remembering how differently things had stood a year ago. Now, instead of demanding my space, Heather was bringing Max and Lily over for the art lessons I had offered to give them. My studio was still my workspace, but I had chosen to share it on my terms, with boundaries intact. Another text arrived, this one from my mother. Dad and I found that Italian cafe you recommended. Meeting you there at 6 for welcome home dinner. These small interactions, normal family communications to an outside observer, represented monumental shifts in our relationships. My art was acknowledged as valuable. My time and space were respected. My choices were accepted, even celebrated. As I hung my favorite piece from the Florence collection on the studio wall, I felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but a cycle. Returning to where I began, but with new wisdom, new perspective, new strength. My journey to Italy had been about art, about career advancement, about creative growth. But it had also been about personal evolution, about finding the courage to say no to toxic patterns and yes to authentic self-expression. In protecting my physical space, I had created emotional space for healthier connections with my family and with myself. I looked around my studio, thinking of all that had happened here, the confrontations, the tears, the stand I had taken, and now the new beginning, the transformed relationships, the deeper understanding of what it means to be both an individual and part of a family. Tomorrow, I would welcome my niece and nephew into this space that I had fought so hard to protect. I would show them how to mix colors, how to express feelings through brushstrokes, how to see the world through an artist's eyes, not because I was obligated, but because I chose to share this part of myself with them. And that, perhaps, was the greatest lesson of all. True giving comes not from obligation or manipulation, but from choice and authentic desire. By standing firm in my boundaries, I had created the freedom to give genuinely rather than resentfully. As the afternoon light filtered through the studio windows, casting long shadows across the floor, I felt a deep sense of peace. This space, this career, this life I had built was worth fighting for. And in fighting for it, I had not lost my family but found a truer connection with them than I had ever known before.